I was born underground. Or at least, that's what it always felt like, for 12 years. For 12 years, my world was a concrete box, a single light bulb always hanging by a thread, and a voice. A voice that told me every day that she loved me. This is my diary, my memory, my truth. Because now I know she was hiding me, but not from the world. She was hiding me from herself. This is going to be a long story, a story from the darkness. If you, like me, believe it's important for stories like this to be heard for the truth, no matter how terrifying, to come to light, please support this story. Just a simple like will help more people see it, and subscribe to walk this path with me to the end. My day always began with silence, not the peaceful silence I would later read about in books. My silence was heavy, oppressive, like a thick blanket of dust and dampness. It was filled with sounds that, to me, were the music of life, the steady drip, drip, drip from the far corner where the ceiling was always wet, the hum of the light bulb overhead, and of course, my own breathing, which seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet. I would wake up on a thin, matted mattress thrown directly onto the cold concrete floor. The first thing I always did was look up at the hatch, a heavy, metal square in the ceiling, my only connection to her. To Mom. It usually took about an hour before I heard the first sounds from above, the creak of floorboards. She was awake. My heart would start to beat faster, a mix of fear and anticipation. What would she be like today? Kind or quiet? Good morning, my little bird. Her voice would drift down through the metal, muffled but so familiar. Good morning, Mom, I'd answer, crawling directly under the hatch to hear her better. Then came the scrape of the bolt. The hatch would open a crack, and a sliver of dim light from the world above would pierce my gloomy kingdom. In that sliver, I could see her face. Only part of it, her eyes and forehead. Her eyes were always filled with anxiety and what I thought was boundless love. She would lower my breakfast down on a rope, usually a can of peaches or stewed meat and a bottle of water. Sometimes, if I had been a good boy, she would add a piece of chocolate. That chocolate was my greatest treasure. I could make it last all day, breaking off tiny pieces and letting them melt on my tongue, closing my eyes and imagining I was eating something magical. After breakfast, our lessons would begin. Mom would sit on the floor above, right by the hatch, and tell me about the world outside. A dangerous, poisoned world. The sky. Leo, she would say in a whisper, as if afraid we'd be overheard. It's not a blue blanket like they draw in silly books. It's a searing dome of radiation. One look at it, and your eyes will melt. The air is laced with poison that slowly burns your lungs. And the trees, they don't offer shade, my little bird. Their branches are bony fingers that snatch the unwary and suck the life out of them. I listened, holding my breath. I believed her every word. How could I not? She was my only source of information. My sun, my moon, and my stars, which I had never seen. I drew her world on the concrete walls with pieces of chalk she sometimes lowered down. My drawings were grim, a black sun emitting black rays, a red sky, people who looked like shadows with empty eye sockets, empty husks, as Mom called them, filled with disease. She said the world was once different, but then the catastrophe happened. The adults made a terrible mistake, and nature decided to punish them. It cleansed the surface, leaving only a few of the most cautious alive. People like us. I saved you, my boy, she often repeated. I brought you here, to our shelter, when you were just a baby. You're safe here. No one will find you here. My only friends were books, old, tattered volumes with yellowed pages. Treasure Island, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the tales of the Brothers Grimm. I read them dozens of times, until they were falling apart. The heroes of these books lived in worlds I couldn't imagine. Worlds with salty oceans, green jungles, and blue skies. I asked Mom if it was ever really like that. That's all make-believe. Leo, she would sigh. Fairy tales to keep people from going mad with the truth. But you're a smart boy. You know the truth. And I did, or I thought I did. The days blurred into one endless, gray stream. Food, lessons, reading, sleep. Sometimes she'd lower down a puzzle. As I assembled a picture of an alpine meadow or a seashore, I'd feel a strange longing. The beauty of those places seemed so real, but I knew it was a lie, a dangerous lie from the before world. Sometimes at night, when the hum of the bulb seemed especially grating and the drips echoed with depressing monotony, I would feel unbearably lonely. I'd curl up on my mattress, hug my knees, and cry softly. I loved Mom. She was everything I had, but I was terrified of her. I was afraid of the sound of her heavy footsteps above, afraid of her silence, which was scarier than any scream, afraid that one morning the hatch wouldn't open, and I would be left all alone, in eternal darkness. My world was for steps by 5, concrete, metal, and her voice, and for 11 years, I believed that was the whole world. In our world, there were rules, iron, unbreakable rules that I learned not with my mind, but with my entire being. They soaked into me like the dampness in these walls. Rule number 1, never shout. Your voice must be quiet, soft. A shout was a sign of panic, and panic attracted them, the ones who might be left outside, the empty husks. Even if I hurt myself or was terrified, I taught myself to clamp a hand over my mouth and whimper silently, my whole body shaking. A shout could cost us our lives. That's what Mom said. Rule number 2, never knock on the hatch. I had to wait patiently, wait until she decided to speak to me. To knock was to demand, and only the strong could make demands. I was weak. I was a fledgling in the nest. Rule number 3, never ask about before, about the time before the basement, about my father, about other people she knew. The past is poisoned, Leo, she would say, her voice turning to ice. Memories are poison. They make you want what no longer exists, and wanting is a weakness. I broke the rules only once. I must have been 7 or 8. The curiosity I'd read about in books overcame my fear. What was up there, beyond the hatch? Not just the room where Mom walked, but further? Were there other doors, windows? One day, after she had lowered my lunch and closed the hatch, I heard her footsteps stop right above me instead of moving away. She was there. I dragged over an old crate, stood on it, and reached for the hatch. It was cold and smooth. I tried to push it. It didn't budge. So I balled my fists and hit it. Once, twice. From above came a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a cry of anger. It was a shriek of primal terror. The kind of sound you make when you see something unimaginably horrible, and then silence. Not my usual basement silence. This was different. Ringing. Hostile. The hatch didn't open the next day, or the day after. I called for her. Quietly at first, then louder, forgetting all the rules. Mom, Mom, I'm sorry. Please. The only answer was silence. On the 3rd day, my water ran out. On the 4th, the food. I lay on the mattress, weak from hunger and fear, staring at the dark square of the hatch. I was sure I was going to die, that she had abandoned me, left me to rot in this box for my betrayal. It went on for 2 weeks, 2 weeks of absolute silence and darkness, because the light bulb had gone out, so she must have turned it off. I drank the same water that dripped from the ceiling, catching it in an empty can. Those were the most terrifying days of my life. And then, on the 15th day, I heard the bolt scrape. The hatch opened. Her face, pale and gaunt, appeared in the opening. She silently lowered down food and water. She didn't say a word, and she didn't speak for another week. She just performed her duties like an automaton. That silent punishment was worse than the hunger. It burned me from the inside out. I understood. To survive, I had to please her. I had to be the perfect son, obedient, quiet, grateful. I started leaving messages for her. I had learned to write by copying letters from books. I wrote on scraps of paper labels from the cans with a pencil stub I found in a junk box. Mom, I love you. Thank you for the food. You're the best mom in the world. I left these notes in the empty can she pulled back up. After that, she started talking to me again. Her voice was warm, and I felt a huge wave of relief. I started drawing for her. On the walls, I depicted scenes from her stories, me and her, holding hands, standing in our safe basement while the poisoned world raged outside. I drew her portrait, a large, kind face with shining eyes, looking down at me from the hatch. I learned to control my voice, to make it soft and respectful. I learned to guess her mood from the sound of her footsteps. Light and quick, she was in a good mood. Slow and shuffling, she was tired or upset. On those days, I became especially quiet and invisible. So I lived, balancing on the thin line between her love and her anger, her love and her fear. It was then that I started keeping my diary, not just notes for her, but for myself. I found an old ledger with lined pages, almost empty. It must have fallen and rolled under a shelf long ago. It became my biggest secret. I hid it under my mattress. Day 4122 or so. Today Mom lowered down a book about space. She said stars are holes in the black dome of the sky that leak radiation, but in the pictures, they're beautiful, like glitter. The punishment for trying to open the hatch lives on in my memory. I will never disobey again. Never. I wrote to keep from going insane, to record my existence, to prove to myself that I was real, even if my world was only a concrete box. It all started with a sound. I was about 12. My hearing had sharpened to a fine point over the years. I could distinguish the flight of a moth near the bulb and tell which corner a mouse was scratching in. But this sound was different. It came from the ventilation grate, a small, rusty square near the ceiling. I had never paid it much attention before. It was just part of the wall. But one day, I heard voices coming from it. They weren't my mother's voice. They were low, male. They weren't just talking. They were laughing. A deep, rolling laugh. Then the sound of a passing car. A low rumble that made the air in my basement vibrate. I froze. Mom said everything up there was dead. That there were no sounds except the howl of the poisoned wind. What was this? Hallucinations? The echoes of the past she sometimes mentioned. I pushed the crate to the wall, climbed on top, and pressed my ear to the cold metal of the grate. The sounds were real. I heard them as clearly as the dripping water. Cars, voices, and one day, I heard music. It wasn't the old, hissing music from my mother's cassettes that she sometimes played upstairs. This was something entirely different. Rhythmic, loud, with a clear beat that made my heart pound in time with it. It had life in it, an energy that was absent from everything that surrounded me. I sat under the grate for hours, until the music faded, and I felt something inside me shifting. The next day, when Mom lowered my breakfast, I couldn't hold it in. Mom, my voice trembled. I heard sounds from the vent, her face in the hatch. Opening changed instantly. The love and calm vanished, replaced by panic. Her eyes darted back and forth. Sounds. What sounds? My little bird. Voices. Men's voices. And music. Really loud. No. She almost screamed, but caught herself, lowering her voice to a frightened whisper. No, Leo, that's not possible. They're hallucinations. The poison in the air sometimes seeps in even here. It plays tricks on the mind, creates mirages for the ears. You must not listen to them. Cover your ears. Sing, if you hear them again. Sing loudly so you can't hear the lies. She spoke so convincingly, with such terror in her voice, that I almost believed her. Almost. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Why was she so afraid? Not angry, but terrified. I started to search, to look for inconsistencies, details that didn't fit her story. and I found one under an old rubber mat in the far corner, which had probably been there forever. I felt something hard. I lifted the edge of the mat. There, stuck in a crack in the concrete floor, was the corner of a newspaper. It was old, yellowed, and dirty, but it was a real newspaper. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. I couldn't make out most of the letters, but I saw a picture, a color picture. It showed a smiling woman in bright clothes, standing next to a shiny red car, and below the picture were numbers 2015. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew Mom had said the catastrophe happened a long time ago, before there were color pictures. She said all the cars had rusted into dust. I hid the scrap in my diary, between the pages. It was my first piece of evidence, my first proof that the world I knew might be a lie. My questions became more cautious, but more persistent. Mom, the books talk about different countries. Were they all poisoned at the same time? Yes, my little bird. Poison knows no borders. Mom, why aren't the canned foods poisoned? If they were made before the catastrophe, they were made in special, clean bunkers, deep underground. Very few of them survived. Her answers were always ready, always logical within the framework of her world. But I started to notice how her voice tensed, how she avoided my gaze. Fear wrestled with curiosity inside me. One part of me desperately wanted to believe her, because if she was lying, then my whole life was, what, a joke? A prison? The thought was so monstrous that I pushed it away. But the other part of me, the part that listened to the music from the vent and stared at the scrap of newspaper, couldn't rest. It wanted to know the truth. At any cost. In my diary, I wrote day. I've lost count. I don't believe in her days anymore. I heard laughter, real, living laughter. Mom says it's poison. But can poison sound so happy? She's lying. I can feel it. But why? Why would she lie? She says she's protecting me. But from what? From laughter? From music? From red cars? It's scary. It's so scary to think about. The cracks in the walls of my world were growing wider, and I felt that soon it would all come crashing down. It happened at night. I was asleep, but a sound I had never heard in our world before jolted me awake. It wasn't the creak of floorboards or the howl of wind in the vent. It was a loud, frantic banging. Someone was trying to break down the door upstairs. I sat up on my mattress, my heart hammering in my throat. I heard Mom's frightened gasp from above, then hurried footsteps, then a crash. The door was kicked in. I heard unfamiliar male voices, loud, authoritative, and Mom screamed not of terror this time, but of fury. She was yelling something about the husks, about the contamination, for them to get out and not touch her child. I curled into a ball in the darkest corner, shaking. Who were they? Them? The empty husks she had warned me about. Had they found us? Suddenly, I heard her footsteps thunder across the floor right above me, heading for the hatch. The scrape of the bolt. The hatch flew open, and the erratic light of flashlights flooded the basement. Mom jumped down, faster than I had ever seen. She didn't even use the ladder. Her face was a mask of madness. Her eyes were wild. In her hand, she clutched a syringe filled with some murky liquid. Leo, my little bird, quiet, she hissed, rushing toward me. They're here, but I won't let them have you. I'll save you. Mom, who are they? I'm scared, I stammered, trying to crawl away. She grabbed me with an iron grip. I was weak. I couldn't resist. It's just a little shot to make you sleep, she whispered, holding me tight. You'll just fall asleep, and when you wake up, everything will be okay. We'll be in another, safer place. I promise. I saw the needle coming toward my arm. I screamed. For the first time in years, I screamed for real, loud, breaking the most important rule, a sharp pain in my shoulder. And almost instantly, a strange, heavy cotton began to spread through my body. The sounds from above became muffled, blurry. Mom's face started to sway and go out of focus. The last thing I remember is her whisper, "I love you, my little bird. I'll always love you." And then darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. An hour? A day? When I woke up, the basement was utterly silent and completely dark. The light bulb was off, my head was throbbing, my body felt weak and disobedient. I called out, "Mom," no answer. I sat up, trying to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. The silence was wrong. I couldn't hear her footsteps upstairs, couldn't hear her breathing, nothing, only the dripping water. I crawled to the center of the room, to where the hatch was. My hands felt the cold concrete and emptiness. The hatch was open. An icy terror seized me. The hatch was open. She never left it open. Never. I got to my trembling feet, steadying myself against the wall. Something had changed. Something terrible had happened. Where was she? What did those people do to her? I went to the hatch and looked up. It was just as dark up there. I felt for the ladder she always put away. It was in its place. I had to know, step by step, clinging to the rungs with weakened fingers. I began to climb. Every step was torture. I had never been upstairs in my life. I didn't know what was waiting for me. Radiation, poisoned air, empty husks. I pulled myself out of the hatch onto a cold wooden floor. The air was different. It smelled of dust, wood, and something else. Something fresh and unfamiliar. I crawled on all fours like a baby, feeling the space around me. I bumped into a table leg, then something soft, a sofa, and then I saw the light. It wasn't a sliver of light from under a door. It was an entire wall of dim, gray light. A window. I crawled toward it. There were bars on it, and beyond them was the world, gray, morning, filled with mist. I saw what Mom had called bony fingers trees, but they weren't black. They were brown, with remnants of yellow leaves, and they weren't reaching for me. They were just standing there. And then I saw the door, the front door. It was ajar, and the same gray light was seeping through the crack. Fear fought with an overwhelming desire. I had to know. I crawled to the door. It was heavy, but it gave way. I pushed it and was blinded. Light, not the light of a bulb. Real, boundless, all-consuming light. It hit my eyes with such force that I cried out and covered my face with my hands. It didn't burn. It was just bright. Too bright. I stood on the threshold of my basement, my prison, my only home. And for the first time in my life, I was looking at the world. I stood hunched over on the doorstep, pressing my palms to my eyes. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to run back into the familiar gloom. Mom was right. The world outside was pain, but the pain wasn't from radiation. It was from the light, the sounds, the smells. The air was cold and damp, and it smelled of wet earth, decaying leaves, and something sharp, chemical. Birds were chirping so loudly it hurt my ears. Everything was too much of everything. I tried to open my eyes. The world was a blurry, blinding smear. I saw splotches of green and brown grass and trees. A gray canvas overhead the sky. It wasn't red, it was just gray. My legs, unaccustomed to uneven ground, gave out, and I fell to my knees on something soft and wet. Grass. I touched it. It was real. That moment, I heard a scream. Not mine. A woman's. Shrill. I turned my head toward the sound. A few feet away stood a woman. She was staring at me in horror. There was no curiosity or sympathy on her face, just shock and fear. She looked at me as if I were a monster. I tried to say something, but only a hoarse cough escaped my throat. I hadn't spoken to anyone but my mother for 12 years. My voice wouldn't obey me. The woman took a step back, pulled a phone from her pocket, and started speaking quickly into it, her terrified eyes never leaving me. I was horrified. Was she an empty husk? Was she going to attack me? I tried to stand, up to run back into the house, but my legs wouldn't support me. I was like a newborn fawn. My muscles, atrophied from a life in a box, refused to work. Soon I heard a new sound. A piercing siren, growing louder and louder. A car with flashing lights pulled up. People in blue uniforms got out, the same ones whose voices I had heard upstairs. They approached me cautiously, as if I were a wild animal. "Easy, son. It's okay," one of them said, holding up his hands to show they were empty. I didn't understand anything. I just sat there on the wet grass, shivering from cold and fear, staring at them with wide, terrified eyes. I was dressed in rags, my skin was deathly pale, and my hair was long and matted. I suppose I really did look like a ghost from the underworld. One of the officers draped a blanket over me. It was warm and soft. Then another car arrived, a white one. People in white coats got out. They talked to me, asked questions, but I couldn't answer. The sounds of their voices blurred into an incomprehensible drone. They gently lifted me onto a stretcher. As they carried me to the car, I looked up at the sky again. The clouds had parted a little, and I saw a patch of blue, a real, piercing blue, and it was the most beautiful and most terrifying thing I had ever seen. The hospital was even worse. Bright fluorescent lights, white walls, the beeping of machines, the smell of alcohol and medicine. People were constantly touching me, shining lights in my eyes, drawing my blood. I curled into a ball and stayed silent. I was trapped, but now it was a new, sterile, frighteningly bright trap. A few days later, after the initial shock had worn off a little, the same police officer who had given me the blanket came into my room. He wasn't in uniform. He sat in a chair by my bed and spoke to me in a quiet, calm voice. "My name is Detective Miller," he said. "We know this is hard for you. We just want to help." I was silent. "We found your mother," he continued. "She's safe. Doctors are working with her." And then, for the first time, I spoke. My voice was hoarse and alien. "Where is Mom?" Detective Miller looked at me with such pity that it made me uneasy. "She's in custody, son, for what she did to you." I didn't understand. "Did to me?" She was saving me." Miller sighed heavily. He rubbed the bridge of his nose as if he had a terrible headache. "Listen," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother loves you very much, so much that her love became dangerous. She was convinced she was protecting you from a cruel and terrible world." He paused, then added a sentence that blew my mind apart. "And in a way, she was right. The world can be cruel and terrible, but she wasn't trying to protect you from the world. She was trying to protect you from the truth, protect me from the truth." But she was my truth. I fell silent again, trying to process his words. Everything was jumbled in my head. My savior was my jailer. My sanctuary was my prison. And the dangerous, poisoned world had met me with a blanket and a police officer's quiet voice. I didn't know what to believe. I only wanted one thing. I wanted my mom. The next few months were like learning to live all over again as an adult. I was moved from the hospital to a special rehabilitation center for children who had survived severe trauma. It was a quiet house in the country with a large garden. At first, I barely left my room. Any loud noise, a passing airplane, a lawnmower, even the laughter of other children in the hallway made me flinch and look for a corner to hide in. Direct sunlight was physically painful, and I wore dark glasses all the time. My main guide into this new world was a woman named Dr. Anya. She was a psychotherapist. She had kind eyes and a very soft voice. She didn't ask me direct questions about the basement. Instead, she brought me a stack of empty notebooks and a pen. "I know it's hard for you to talk," she said, "but you can write. Write everything you feel, everything you remember, everything that scares you. This will be just for you, your diary." And so I began to write. I continued the diary I had started. in the basement, but now on clean, white pages. It became my salvation. The paper accepted all my fear, all my confusion. Today I went into the garden without my glasses for the first time. The sky was blue, so blue it made me want to cry. I touched the trunk of a tree. The bark was rough and warm. Mom said they were poisonous. I waited for my hand to start burning, but nothing happened. The tree was just a tree. I don't know how to live with that. Today I went into the garden without my glasses for the first time. The sky was blue, so blue it made me want to cry. I touched the trunk of a tree. The bark was rough and warm. Mom said they were poisonous. I waited for my hand to start burning, but nothing happened. The tree was just a tree. I don't know how to live with that. I was learning to walk, not just to move, but to walk confidently, on grass, on asphalt, to climb stairs without holding onto the wall. A physical therapist worked with me every day, and my weak muscles slowly gained strength. I was learning to speak. My vocabulary was limited to 19th century books and my mother's stories. I spoke in strange, outdated phrases. A social worker taught me modern language, showed me movies, played music for me. The same rhythmic, lively music I had once heard from the vent. Now I knew it was called pop music, but the hardest part was learning to trust. Everyone around me was kind, but a part of me, the little boy from the basement, was always waiting for the trap to spring, waiting for the punishment, waiting for the food to be taken away and the lights to be turned off. Sometimes at night, I would dream of the basement. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, and for a second, I'd think I was back there, on my old mattress, and that everything happening now was just a dream. A part of me still believed her, clung to her words. Maybe the poison just worked slowly. Maybe these people were pretending to be kind to lull me into a false sense of security, only to do something terrible later. That paranoia, nurtured by 12 years of isolation, was lodged deep inside me, like a splinter. One day, Dr. Anya asked me, "Leo, what are you most afraid of right now?" I was silent for a long time, then wrote in my notebook, "I'm afraid she was right." And below that, I added, "And I'm also afraid she was wrong." That paradox was tearing me apart. If she was right, then I was in danger. If she was wrong, then my entire life, her entire sacrifice, all her love, was based on a lie. And I didn't know which was more terrifying. Almost a year had passed. I had learned a lot. I could look at the sky without flinching. I could talk to people. I even started attending a small school at the center. But the main question still remained unanswered. Why? Detective Miller, who visited me from time to time, decided I was ready to know the truth. The whole truth. He came to the center and sat across from me in Dr. Enya's quiet office. He brought a file with him. "Leo, we've finished the investigation," he said gently. "We've pieced together the whole story, your mother's and yours."
He told me that my mother, Elena, had a severe mental illness, schizophrenia. She had been treated for a long time, but the illness would recede and then return with new force. My father, he had died in a car crash when I was just a year old. That was the last straw for her. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. She stopped trusting doctors, stopped trusting the world. She was taken to a hospital for involuntary treatment. And I, a 1-year-old baby, was placed in a temporary foster home. The child welfare system was supposed to find me a permanent home. But a few months later, my mother escaped from the hospital. In her sick mind, the world had become a hostile, dangerous place. And the people from child services who wanted to help me became enemies who had stolen her child. She tracked down where I was. One night, she broke into the house and kidnapped me, took her little bird to save him. She brought me to this old, abandoned house on the edge of town that had belonged to her parents, and she locked me in the basement. In her reality, this wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate act of motherly love and protection. She created a world for me that she herself believed in. a world poisoned by the grief and fear that lived inside her own head. The world was never poisoned. Her mind was. I listened to the detective, and tears streamed down my cheeks. It wasn't hysteria. They were quiet, bitter tears. I wasn't crying for myself. I was crying for her, for the woman who wanted so desperately to protect me that she became my greatest tormentor. What's happening with her now? I asked. She's in a specialized clinic, Miller replied. She's getting the best treatment possible. But she's still there, in her own world. She asks about you every day. She's certain you're safe in a new, more secure bunker. He left, leaving me alone with this monstrous yet liberating truth. I opened my diary. The last diary Dr. Anya had given me. I'm writing these lines sitting by a window. It's raining outside. A real, ordinary rain. I watched the drops slide down the glass. They look like the drops that used to splash into the bucket in my basement, but now I know it's just water, just the sky crying. I think about her often. Do I hate her? No, I can't. She gave me life, and then she locked it in a box. She taught me to read, and then told me about a world that didn't exist. She was my monster and my only god. She told me the world outside was dangerous. And you know what? She wasn't wrong. I see it on the news. I hear it in people's conversations. There is pain and cruelty and fear in the world. She wasn't wrong when she said the world was dangerous. She just forgot to add that she was too. My story is over. I spent 12 years in silence, where the only answer I got was my own echo. Now, I'm learning to live in a world full of voices. And it's so important for me to know what you think. What did you feel listening to this? This isn't a story about a monster and a victim. It's much more complicated than that. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Every comment, every subscription is a voice telling me that I'm no longer alone in the dark.